Hey, folks, it's that time again. It's time for another episode of Getting to Know Dynatrace. My name's David Jones. There's so many Davids on this planet. We always get confused. Dave, you know what I'm talking about. So everyone calls me Jonesy, so feel free, folks. Listen, these Getting to Know Dynatrace sessions, we love having them. The thing that makes them so powerful and so unique and so fun are your questions. So, obviously, as we're going through today, and David is going to, do a demo for us. Ask questions. Feel free. Ask us about anything you like related to Dynatrace. If you ask us questions unrelated to Dynatrace, please keep them to something like, what's the fastest land mammal? I'll give you a hint. It is the cheetah. Anyways, listen. With Getting to Know Dynatrace, we always have guest people here to demonstrate Dynatrace for us. This week, we've got Dave Thomas. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, how's it going?
All right. So, as always with Getting to Know Dynatrace, what we also do is we start off with a segment that we call What's New at Dynatrace. So let me get my screen shared here. Once we get my screen shared, there we go. Get into our What's New segment at Dynatrace. And as always with What's New at Dynatrace, where do we go? We go to the blog. We go to the news blog site. It's real easy. It's dynatrace.com/news/blog. And that's going to have all the great new stuff here at Dynatrace. A couple of things that, we want to bring to your attention right now that are published on the blog. Obviously, the release notes. We've just gone through and released version 1.247. It's got some really exciting new features and capabilities. One of those capabilities is a new attack blocking capability. So Dynatrace now has the ability through our AppSec components to be able to actually go out and determine that an attack is in fact actually happening and give you the option to automate the blocking of that type of attack. That is, super cool capability that's new with 247. Also, we're going to be at a couple of industry events, like, for example, the Black Hat 2022 event. We're going to be there. We're going to be on the floor. If you want to see some of the things that Dynatrace does around attack prevention, vulnerability detection, how we can help you create more secure CI/CD pipelines, by all means, please visit us at that conference. Also, there's a couple of other interesting things. Let me flip over for a second into the blog site. There's this report that's right brand new on the blog site. This is from a group that we call, it's called Forrester. And essentially, this is like a study that they've done of what the overall total economic impact for Dynatrace is. And so, I invite you to give this a read. Go look at that report. It's very interesting. Sort of gives you what the total kind of expected ROI is for Dynatrace. So that's a little bit about what's new. Our attendance at the Black Hat conference, the new release notes for the new release of Dynatrace, and this TEI report. There's also obviously a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm sort of glossing over because it's been a couple of weeks since we've talked to you last. There's other blog articles on what we're doing around AWS Transit Gateway and VPC flow logs. A lot more happening around logs. Man, there's so many exciting things that we're doing related to log monitoring that's coming out as well. All right, so let's go on to the next segment. The next segment is Did You Know? So, one of the great things about getting to Dynatrace is it's not just for people that are new to Dynatrace, but if you're familiar with Dynatrace, you've been using us for a couple of years, we're always going to point out things that maybe you weren't aware of. And so this week for the Did You Know segment, did you know that we actually have extensions that extend our visibility using SNMP protocol to your network devices? So if you've got routers, switches, firewalls, whatever it might be, if we can connect to it using SNMP, we can actually start ingesting metrics directly from those devices and then evaluate and look at those metrics to understand if something at the device level is in fact actually causing a particular problem. And this can include any type of metrics that you can pull off of SNMP. That's anything from your traffic. So it could be your TCP traffic, your UDP traffic. It could be your device statistics, like the CPU load, the amount of memory that's being consumed off that device. It can even include things like the physical aspects of the device, like the fan temperature, the fan speed, the fan health. So all of those metrics off of those devices are things that you can pull into Dynatrace. And that's really, if you think about what Dynatrace does, it makes a lot of sense because Dynatrace is a very holistic overview of all of the different components that make up your applications. And these devices that are out there, whether or not it's a router, a switch, or a firewall, they're definitely part of your environment and things that you need to monitor. So that's a little bit about, from this week's Did You Know? And basically, did you know that you can use SNMP extensions to connect your devices into Dynatrace? There you go. If you didn't know that, now you do. Now let's get off and get to the real sort of meat of today's session, which is the demonstration. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to hand things over to Dave Thomas. So, hey, Dave, welcome to Getting to Know Dynatrace. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the demonstration.
Yeah, sure. My name's Dave Thomas. I've been with the company a little over a month now. And I came from the DevOps world, right? So my last two positions, I was down there in the trenches, as it were, I kind of understand a lot of the pain points that, many people see out there in the DevOps world. We were also Dynatrace customers too. And, I absolutely love the product so much, and I love the people at Dynatrace that, I figured I'd come over here and, kind of do what I can to help, make this a better product and help, everybody out there watching this, solve their issues.
Welcome, Dave.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Dave, it's your show, man. So go ahead and walk us through a demonstration of Dynatrace. And folks, as always, as Dave is doing this, please feel free to start sending in some of your questions. I'm starting to see some questions queue up in the chat. We'll get to some of those in a moment, but thank you very much for that. Feel free to ask those questions. And Dave, take it away.
All right. So what we're looking at here is a dashboard, right? A lot of products, have this kind of holistic, view of everything going on in an environment. And what I like to show off here is just the various components that we can monitor that makes up your application, as well as some different monitoring pieces that we use to kind of see what's going on, right? So we have synthetic monitoring, so you can kind of go through actions and kind of see what it looks like, from different locations. We have your application health from the front end. We have your database health, as well as the backend infrastructure, right? And over here on the left side of the dashboard, you can see, kind of your green is good, red is bad sort of view. And we have many different dashboards that come right out of the box. Day one, you start this product, you start using the product, and you have all these dashboards. We also have some custom dashboards too, but that's not really what the magic is behind Dynatrace, right? This is good, but what we really want to kind of talk about is what actually contributes to Dynatrace being your full observability platform. The way we collect all this data is using something called the OneAgent, right? Now, many different aspects of Dynatrace can be monitored using just one installer on your machines, right? Whether it's Windows, Linux, we even support AIX, Kubernetes, and OpenShift, right? Anywhere that you're running your workloads, we can install this one agent and we can collect your infrastructure or infrastructure metrics. We can collect your front end performance, right? And it's just as easy as a couple lines of code. So if we take a look here, just these 3 commands will go out there, install the agent, and then just within 5 minutes, you're off to the races, right? You have all your data coming in to Dynatrace, right? So I really want to kind of showcase just how important it is that this is just one agent versus multiple agents, because you're going to see here we have a lot of different features, and there's nothing that you need to do other than install this one agent for many of these features. Now, once you install the one agent, yep, go ahead.
Hey, actually, Dave, I just want to sort of throw in some color commentary because you're absolutely right. It's really simple to install the agent. You showed it. It's just like 3 command line arguments. So the question becomes, could you use things like Chef or Puppet or Ansible to automate the deployment, and run these commands remotely?
Oh, absolutely, right? If you take a look here on the installer page, we even have the instructions for Ansible and Puppet right here on the Dynatrace OneAgent installation page. And in fact, in my time as a customer of Dynatrace, I even was able to set it up in Terraform really easily to deploy to a Kubernetes cluster, right? So it's very easy to automate this.
Actually, could you just stop for a second, Dave, and just give us a brief description as to what Terraform is? Like, folks, if you're new to Dynatrace and you've not heard a lot of the jargon and the words that we're using, like if you're not familiar with it, I'd like to take just a moment and just sort of explain some of this stuff. And Dave, what's Terraform all about?
Yeah, sure. So Terraform kind of it's what's called infrastructure as code, right? So think about how traditionally when you're managing infrastructure, it's a lot of clicking in GUIs or maybe running some commands to try to get the infrastructure stood up to how you want it. What infrastructure as code does is you can go out there and you can say, I want an EC2 server to use this instance size and to have this software installed on it. And then when you go and run that Terraform code, Terraform in the backend knows how to get the infrastructure stood up exactly how you defined it, right? So it's essentially saying, here's what I want it to look like. And then Terraform goes and automatically does it. And the beauty of that is not just going and saying, hey, here's how I want it, but it's also being able to reuse some pieces of that code, right? So in my case, I took that Terraform module that installed Dynatrace, and I was able to genericize it within our organization so that anybody else who's standing up a Kubernetes cluster can use that same piece of code. They didn't have to do anything else but provide variables, and it stands it up the same way every time.
Awesome. Very cool. Thanks for walking us through that, Dave. Really appreciate it. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Let's keep going with the demo.
Of course. No, that was a good question. So once you install the OneAgent onto your host, you'll notice this is what we call our Smartscape topology, right? And so what this is an overview of everything that's out there running from the application level all the way down to the data center. And again, there's nothing we had to do here. So one of the pieces of magic sauce of Dynatrace is something that we call Davis AI. It's a deterministic AI engine that's running in the background to look at all the data points, all the network traffic, and put everything together automatically with no configuration, right? So this is a topology map, and this is taking a look at all the different hosts that we have the OneAgent installed on. And as it's going through, it's taking a look at what processes are running on that host, what services those processes contribute to, as well as the front end application or website, mobile app, whatever it is you have running that is running those services, right? And all of this is automatic. All these different lines going to and from different nodes here are automatically determined by OneAgent, right? And so this is kind of a good way to show you, what's going on in the background, as well as, where all of your applications are residing. And it's one of, I think, me personally, is one of those wow moments of Dynatrace where it's just like, okay, so I go out here, I install these agents, and it just does this automatically. I don't believe it, but I mean, it's 5 minutes on all your servers, and you get this, right? And so from here, you can
Hey,
take a
actually,
look.
hold
Oh,
on
go
one
ahead.
second, Dave. Let's go back for a second, because there's actually something that got snuck into the Smartscape recently. I'm wondering
Oh,
if you just
yes.
take a minute to show this, because this is the Smartscape, folks. For the most part, we haven't seen a lot of new capabilities or new features built into the Smartscape, because it just does what it's supposed to do, right? Like it just works. But now what we've got is, because we're working a lot more with application security, we've got these new capability. Dave's going to just give us a quick glance at this. This is brand new.
Yeah, so this right here is our vulnerability management, right? Our vulnerability, just a display of vulnerabilities across your environment, right? So again, OneAgent, that same agent that we installed to monitor all the processes, is also able to do this application security monitoring. And so what it's doing here is it's going through in real time and monitoring all the processes, all the traffic, and everything going on those hosts. And it's able to flag when you have some application vulnerabilities. This is really cool. I absolutely love this. And you can see here, all these different things are connected. Now you can know, okay, if I have a vulnerability here that's going on, here's everything else that it could potentially be talking to. So it really helps out with, seeing exactly not just what's going on from an application, performance level, but also what's going on with your security posture, which, I don't have to tell you that it's becoming a bigger and bigger concern for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for showing us this, Dave. Like, in the past, the Smartscape, it does a great job of, when there's a problem, me being able to see what are all the interconnected components. And that's great when you're trying to diagnose a problem, right? But this is a completely new use case. And so that topology map, just like what you just said, I can now visually see that, hey, here's a host that has a vulnerability that's detected. Now I can see topologically, what does that host talk to? In other words, how is my threatscape exposed, within this topology map? So that's super cool. Really appreciate you showing us that, because that is brand new functionality, folks. So again, this is a great thing about getting to know Dynatrace. We just get a chance to talk about new things, because there's always new capabilities and features that are being pushed out into our platform every couple of weeks. So I'm sorry again, Dave. I digress. Feel free, man. Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah, no, of course. And yeah, I do need to throw that vulnerability view into my talk track, because like you said, it is very new, right? So it's just one of
It
those
is.
things that
Yeah.
I got to get in the mindset of showing off there. And speaking of which, I mean, you can even see it here, right? So this right here is the host view, right? So when we kind of drill down into it, we can see each individual host, and statistics and performance metrics for that host as well. So again, right here, you can see the vulnerabilities that are, on those hosts. If we wanted to, we can even drill down into one of these and go into our application security section of the platform. As you scroll down, you can see right here on the right side, these are all the processes that were picked up by that OneAgent automatically, right? And if we wanted to, we can even go into each of these and take a look at the performance and things like that from there. And we can take a look at that a little bit later here. We pull in all the logs, and the cool part about this is it's not just disjointed, hey, I have the logs from an app, or hey, I have the logs from an application. These logs here will be pulled into, this is automatically in the background with Davis AI, used to kind of help determine what's going on with your application, right? So if you have an issue, these log files are very helpful, and it can even drill down on the distributed tracing level and show you, hey, here's all the relevant log messages to this issue. So this is kind of an overview of the host, right? We looked at the host, we looked at the Smartscape topology, but the part that I really love about this platform is right here. It's the problem card. So, like I said, I came from a DevOps background, and, I'm very familiar. I came from a traditional ops background as well. So just server and storage management. and I'm very familiar with when you have, when it rains, it pours sometimes, right? So you may have an outage with your application. What's going on with it, right? What's being affected? I have 200 emails and Slack notifications, and I don't know what's going on, right? So what we do well here with this problem card is show you what's going on when you have an issue. So at the top here, you can see the affected applications, you can see the affected services, as well as the affected infrastructure. And then, if you have SLOs defined, you can even see which of your SLOs are being affected by this problem. So this is really good for the business.
That's brand new, Dave.
Yeah, again, we're always releasing things, right, Jonesy?
Yeah. That's brand new. I didn't notice that until you pointed it out, and it's like, wow, that's awesome. That is great.
No, it is. Yeah, and I picked again. I need to update my demo screens, but there's even the ability to click through to this, so you can actually see which specific SLOs are affected. So that's really awesome in my opinion. And so just real quick at the top here, I want to highlight this too. So I talked about the Davis AI and how it's pulling in all these entities and monitoring things in the background. This kind of shows you how amazing this is, that this all happened automatically with just the OneAgent. So there are 17,700 monitored entities for this specific problem that Davis AI was able to look at and correlate, or not just correlate, but it was able to really drill down and kind of see what's going on with each of those entities, right, and determine these root causes. And so I think that's really cool right here, that, think about trying to check various application, front ends, and checking the API servers and the databases and just everything in the background. You don't have to do any of that to determine what's going on with your application. Now, something that I had never thought about before I learned about Dynatrace was, how is this actually affecting the users, and which users is it affecting, right? And we're able to do that because we have that full end-to-end observability. We can tell you how many users are being affected by a problem. And if we wanted to, we can even click through to this and kind of see a drill down of which users are affected. And this is just a really powerful thing right here, right? It's easy to gloss over. Okay, yeah, I see 888 affected users, but we also know who this is, right? So maybe you can send out, a discount to the users that couldn't check out in your application, or maybe these users, some of them have a gold SLO and or gold SLA, and you need to factor that into whether or not their uptime has been affected, right? So this is something that I think is one of the biggest things to kind of look at when you're talking about the problem cards here. Now, as we scroll down on this left side here, we can see which front-end applications were affected. This can also show you which mobile applications are affected, as well as your synthetic monitoring actions are affected by this outage or this degradation. And so here, I kind of want to highlight something that I think is really cool. We do automatic baselining in the background. So when Dynatrace OneAgent is installed and it's pulling in all these metrics, what we're also doing is not just showing you what's going on, we're also doing some automated baselining, right? And so it's watching your application, and this is just from day one. There's nothing you need to do. It's automatically watching what's going on, how the metrics look, how many users are hitting this, and it will create a baseline. And then what happens is, when something happens outside of that baseline, that's when you start to see these problems show up, right? So in this case, we have an auto-detected baseline of 475 milliseconds, and it was exceeded by 92% to 912 milliseconds. Now, to me personally, 475 milliseconds versus 912 milliseconds, it's not a big difference, right? And if I'm configuring monitoring manually, right, I may not think about the fact that that's an issue, but Dynatrace automatically knows that, because it says, hey, normally it's this low and now it's higher, right? And I think that's really cool to kind of see.
Hold on a second, Dave. So you know what? You're spot on with that. If we look at that, it says it degraded by 475 milliseconds. So that's like close to a half a second. You and I I can sit there and look at a half a second and go, all right, it's slow, but all right, that's fine. I'll just keep going. I don't think much of it, right? But here's the problem, okay? That 475 millisecond delay, okay, that's per transaction, okay? That's per request. That's fine for an individual request, but what happens when you've got thousands of requests that are being tied up? So now, if we're waiting a half a second for thousands of requests, what's happening on the back end compute wise? The amount of load that's now being basically hung up because of that. So yeah, 475 milliseconds to you and me, we can shrug that off and go, all right, that's okay. But when you start compounding this with really huge numbers, yeah, that's a problem. That's a huge problem. So yeah, no,
That's a big
great
problem,
that you pointed that out, Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's one of those things that you don't think about until you see something like this, right? That's very common for people to just ignore that. So, yeah, that's big, right? And so, just one of the other things I want to showcase here, real quick, before we move on, is that we also are able to see, what browser they're using, which geolocation they're from, which operating system they're using, right? So, like, maybe you're having an issue, and you can kind of isolate it to, hey, it's only happening in it's only happening in Europe, right? Or maybe it's only affecting users who are on Windows, right? So this is kind of a good way for you to, from a high level overview, see kind of what's going on, and maybe help, give you some of those breadcrumbs to figure out, what's going on. But the real meat and potatoes of this problem card is right here on the right side, the root cause, right? Up here, you can see which services are affected or were contributing to the degradation in this case, right? But then we can even drill down into here and see the deployment events, right? So we have various integrations where you can send an event to Dynatrace, and it will, again, Davis AI in the background will automatically determine, hey, if I see an issue and it was after this change, this event most likely was the reason why this service changed and why we're starting to see this event, right? And you can even contribute, various properties or parameters here to kind of add in some additional information that can make it easier for you to remediate, right? So in this case, we have like the owner of the code change, we have who approved it, we even have the actual git commit, so you can go directly to which piece of code was changed. And then from there, we can see the actual events, it's the actual events that the service was seeing, right? And so from here, if we wanted to, we could click this button and drill down to the code level issues, right? And again, automatically with OneAgent, we didn't have to configure anything. We can click this because Davis AI was able to say, hey, I noticed that this call goes to this API server, which runs this piece of code. So this is the piece of code that, created this issue. And, I think it can't be overstated just how useful that is, right? Jonesy, I've seen it many times where you're sitting in like a war room, right? And you have people from all these different areas that are trying to determine just where it's even coming from, right? Who's responsible, which piece of code, which server, whatever, right? I think that's really big.
It is.
Really
it's
big
huge
feature.
Yeah, and the fact is that when you click on that button, it gives you that analysis, tells you this is what you need to be looking at. So think about all of the human capital that gets saved when there's an issue like this. Like normally when there's a problem, you take your best and brightest people and you have them start sifting through log files, looking for that needle in a haystack. But with Dynatrace, it's like, hey, this check destination caused an issue. It happened because of a code change, and here's where it's actually the problem is. And all you really have to do to get that kind of level of visibility is you run the installer, right? So, hey, Dave, listen, let's take a pause for a moment because we do have some questions that are queuing up. And this question here is, From Edward, do you have other automated actions like restarting a service, deleting temp files based upon metric violation? Well, actually, Dave, if you go back to that problem card we were just looking at, right? And if you scroll up to the section that was showing us the deployment event, here is a perfect example of how Dynatrace could work in combination with automation tools like Ansible or ServiceNow remediation routines. Here, you actually can see that there was a line for remediation, and it points to this Ansible tower job. So that Ansible tower job actually rolled back this deployment change. And so this problem actually automatically got closed. Here's the scenario. Somebody pushes a deployment change. Dynatrace detects that there is a problem. We know that this problem was related to a deployment change because we're connected to ServiceNow. ServiceNow is then telling us that, hey, all right, because Dynatrace detected a problem, we're going to run this remediation routine that backs out that change and closes out the problem. So that's essentially the story about what just happened right here. So you can use Dynatrace with, anything like, Ansible, ServiceNow, PagerDuty, all sorts of different CI/CD tools as well. And Dave, just for a moment, take us over into the left nav, because there's even some new capabilities that came out a couple of builds back. If you go into the cloud automation section, you can see here there's this orchestration projects. This is really new. This has only been out for a couple of months. This is part of our cloud automation capabilities. And if you go ahead and click on that cloud automation instance, this actually shows us here that we can go out, create a project using our cloud automation, and then we can manage the whole delivery process. So in this particular case, you can use Dynatrace and set up rules to define what's a good build, what's a bad build. If the build fails, push it back, but then give the developer some context as to why it failed. If it's good, let it go through. And so Dynatrace becomes effectively what we call a quality gate. What you can do with this to extend it is that you can trigger things. And so in this particular case, if you wanted to use this to then trigger some automated routine, absolutely you could do that. The scenario is this is all about Dynatrace providing answers to drive the automation. So if I want to automate my CI/CD pipeline, I can use our cloud automation capabilities to do that. When there are issues, depending upon what rules are applying, Dynatrace can, like I said, let something through or fail it. But then it can also do things like write a note out into Jira to tell the human beings that, hey, this event occurred, thought you should know about it. So there's a couple of questions here that just popped up related to what we're just talking about. Is this based around Kepton? Yes, it is. In the background, there is an open source project that is being driven off of something called Captain. This is Captain based, essentially, is what our cloud automation is doing. There's some other questions around, can this work with, for example, Jenkins and GitLab? 100%, it can be used in combination with that. So, all right, this is great, Dave. Thanks for walking us through this part. And again, folks, thanks for those questions. Do we have other questions here? Comment on a management zone. So Dave, can you just really briefly explain to everyone about what a management zone is?
Yeah, sure. So a management zone is essentially a delineation of your infrastructure, your applications, right? And you can determine how you wanted to split those up, right? Management zones could be by location, it could be by business unit, it could be by application, right? But a management zone, what it allows you to do is to only look at specific, the entire platform, but from the lens of that little section that you carved off, right?
Yeah.
But then you can take that further, right, and then control who can have access to that, right? So if maybe you split it by business units, maybe this business unit over here doesn't need to look at everything else, right, and just give them access to to their management zone, right? So it's a good way for you to control, the visibility into the platform.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation, Dave. So like the management zones, ultimately it's in essence just sort of illustrates how Dynatrace is a very enterprise mature platform. And what I mean by enterprise mature is when you're a large organization, like let's just say for argument's sake that you're a bank or a big retailer, and you've got teams and you've got dozens, if not hundreds of people that are all working on different things in your environment. The last thing in the world that you want to do is give everybody access to everything, right? There's, some developers that are working on some teams, they shouldn't see other projects that other developers are working on. And so management zones are a way that Dynatrace, basically filters that view. And you could tie it to your federated login. So your SSO and LDAP groups are tied to specific management zones. I have to tell you, I do a lot of work with the banking industry and the telecom industry up here in Canada. And this just shows off the enterprise maturity of Dynatrace. And those organizations, if you're a huge organization, you love this stuff because it just allows you to really sort of make sure and be able to manage who's seeing what rather than just giving everybody a view into everything. All right, other questions here. Can you show some examples of K8's monitoring, specifically log monitoring? What do you think, Dave? Should we just hop into the log view? Let's do that.
Yeah, sure. So if we go here, we can take a look at all of our logs, right, that are coming in. One of the things that I think is really cool about this is that we can then filter it down based on properties or just actual pieces of information that we pull from the logs themselves, right? So if we look here, we can actually look at the event types, and we have right here K8s, right, for Kubernetes, right? And so now we're seeing all of the logs that come in from that Kubernetes cluster, as well as their status and various things like that. But what Dynatrace does is it can also, again, it can determine what this log entry is connected to, which entities it's talking to, which Kubernetes node that this log entry belongs to, and even what applications that this correlates to. And you can go down here and you can see all the information about that log. And if we want to, we can even take a look and drill down into each of these individual pieces. Now deploying, the OneAgent to Kubernetes is simple. Again, it's a OneAgent, right? It's a little bit different than if you're installing it on the operating system, right? But it's essentially the same thing. So if we take a look here, we can actually see all we need to do to deploy it to Kubernetes is fill out a few pieces of information here, deploy this manifest file, and then just run this to actually do the application of that file, right? All of this will get you your visibility into the Kubernetes cluster, into each individual pod, as well as the node information. But what it'll do is also allow you to pull in those log entries as well, right? So again, OneAgent just able to pull this in, which I think is just, it's magic, right? Because working with Kubernetes is usually not straightforward.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like the industry in general is coming to a certain understanding that, hey, Kubernetes is, it's not as easy as it sounds. And it's, if anything, what it's done is it's sort of added to the complexity. Now, when it comes to Kubernetes and logs, I think that what's happening is that, now that we're taking all of our workloads and we're containerizing them, we're actually, from an observability standpoint, making it that much harder for us to actually understand what's going on, what's talking to what. And the reason for that is we're seeing this explosion in log content now, because now every pod, every container within those pods, they are all generating log information, right? And so now our logs are exploding in size. Our logs are just getting massive. As you're showing here, like all of this log content is just exploding in size. And what you showed us, Dave, is that, Dynatrace is making it super simple to be able to go in and, find the information that's relevant. It's all connected in terms of the context. So your application and your end user is tied to the log information that's actually being generated from those containers running on those pods. And even the things like the Kubernetes events that you're showing right there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, and so a lot of my time, in the DevOps world has been spent with Kubernetes, and I can't tell you how nice it is to have everything in just a single pane of glass, right? Because a lot of my time was hunting down issues with, again, the log files, right? Determining, hey, which pod was having the issue, what was going on in that pod, right? We're able to determine that and bring it all together in just this one view. And this alone to me is
Yeah.
worth it.
So we got another question here. Can we stream specific log category to the dashboards? Actually, let's go back into the log view for a second, Dave, because that's super simple, right? So once I'm in the log view now, all I have to do is, let's go filter by, and let's do Kubernetes, and let's like Kubernetes node, okay? And let's pick one of these nodes. So here I've got my Kubernetes load, and I've basically now I've got this, I've got this view that I filtered on. If I go into actions, I think from there I should be able to just pin that to a dashboard, right? So I can just pin that to a dashboard. If I want to, I can create a new one just like that. Go ahead and do that. Let's open it up. That's it, folks. That's how easy it is. I just go in and I create now the the filter that I want on my logs, and based upon that filter, I just go pin the dashboard and done. So great question. Thank you. We've made it super simple. What we've also done, just so everyone is aware, and this is new capability, is we've got a lot more log processing capabilities, and these are super exciting. I don't want to go into too much detail about them here today, right, Dave? I think what we want to do is save a little bit that for some of our big announcements of what's coming out in the fall. But folks, just keep your ears open for what we're going to be doing for logs. It's super exciting.
Yeah,
What do we
big.
got here? Hey, so Dave, what do you think about this one? How do you search for services or hosts in the system? How would you search for a host?
No, that's a good question, right? So at the top of this, every page really, we have this search bar, and this is a universal search, right? So if we wanted to look for, let's say, easy travel, up here you can see everything that has easy travel in the name, right? And then we can go and, oh, look, we have a booking service that we could click into, or we can go into this host, right? So that's one way of doing it, and that's kind of nice. But what you can also do is, as we kind of showed you earlier, is you can go into, if you know you're looking for a host, for example, we could go here and we could do these filters. And the filters are pretty powerful, in my opinion, with Dynatrace, because again, just about everything that we pull in, you can do a filter by, right? So if we're taking a look for something called BB1, right, we just do a name search, voila, there you go. The same thing is true for the services, right? So if we go down to the services tab, you could take a look right here, and you could do the same sort of filtering. So if we're looking for Nginx, we can even just do that. There you go. You have so it's two different ways of doing it. Just whichever is comfortable for you.
Super cool. Super cool. All right. How are we doing? We got more questions coming in, or should we just keep on going? Okay, you know what, Dave? Let's just keep on going. What do you want to show next?
All right, yeah. So I think the thing I want to show next is the front end applications, right? So we spent a lot of time here looking at the back end, the infrastructure, the services and processes. But what's really cool to look at here is what this looks like from the front end application, right? So if we take a look, normally I have this already filtered, but if we take a look for the Angular app, let's see. My apologies. I'm still getting used to my talk track. There we go. Okay, so if we take a look at this, and let's go back a little bit further. Let's look at 72 hours of information here. By the way, I want to call that out real quick. This is our time selector up here in the top right of the screen. On a majority of the screens in Dynatrace, this is a persistent time selector where you can use to kind of drill down into what the information looks like at that point in time or during that time frame, right? So this is a really cool feature to use if you're doing troubleshooting or just curious what things look like at a point in time. So if we're looking at the last 72 hours here, on this screen, we kind of get a high-level overview at the top here of what this application looks like from the front end, right? So what the users are seeing from the browsers or what we're seeing from the synthetic monitoring. You can see your top, all kinds of cool information the business would like to see, like the top browser used, the geolocation breakdown, how long it's taking to load things, and an app dex rating, with 1 being the best and 0 being some improvements are needed.
Hey, Dave, could you go into the geolocation breakdown for a second? Because I get this question from time to time. Hey, what about like a world map? I want to be able to see where everything is, in a sort of like a geographical sort of context. Because we got this geolocation breakdown, but if we scroll down a little bit more, we actually have the option of viewing this world map, right? And so now we're breaking this down by country. And if we click into one of these countries, there you go. So you can drill down into this, and depending upon your settings and the country that you go into, sometimes this will break it down by state, by city. So you get it by region. So you could see if there's what's the performance coming from one region to another. And so the question becomes, well, why is that important? What does that mean from a business context standpoint? So there's services out there that are designed to accelerate the performance of your page. Things like CDN services or content delivery network. The way that they work is you push content closer to where your end users are. If there's an issue with the CDN, having this type of view is super useful in being able to allow you to understand that, hey, maybe I've got an oversubscribed point of presence, or maybe I've got a misrouted point of presence because performance from a certain geography is worse than another geography. So just a couple of pointers. Again, Dave, these are little things. We could spend literally the entire show walking through all the features that we have for monitoring applications.
Oh yeah, there's a lot to this platform. I'm still learning new things every day, but it's all real usable stuff. So yeah, that's really cool. I actually learned something today because I didn't know we had that view world map there. So again, lots of buttons to click, lots of things to look at. But if we go back here and we take a look at the overview, we can also see our top user actions, right? So these are things like loading the web page, maybe submitting a form, could be clicking a button, right? This kind of gives you an overview of how much time is being consumed by each of those actions. You can also take a look at the errors going on, right? So, things like 404 errors, CSP violations, CSRF, things like that going on. You can see everything that's happening. And again, these are from your real users, right? As well as your synthetic tests to be able to see what's happening, what the issues are. And because we're using the OneAgent and we have that end-to-end observability, if we want to, we can even drill all the way down into the back-end code level that could be contributing to this, right? And so I think that's really powerful, being able to do that. And seeing
Dave,
here, yeah.
I was just going to say, do you want to walk us through a user session maybe to show people where this data comes from?
Yeah, sure. So when we take a look at the user session, you have a lot of different things you can look at here. Up at the top, you have things like the operating system, the screen resolution, the errors, and things like that. When you drill down here or scroll down here, you can take a look at the individual. Sorry, let's see. Let's see. You can take a look at the actual waterfall analysis. Oh, I chose the wrong one. I'm sorry about this. Again, I'm
No, no,
still
no.
relatively new. I'm trying to get everything together here.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, 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 Dave. Dave, you're doing a great job. And this what Dave is showing us here is
There we go.
there's a perfect example of one. This ultimately, this real user information, it's coming to us via a JavaScript that automatically gets inserted into the page, and then it allows us to see things like this. So keep going, Dave.
Okay, so then we take a look at this here, and we can see each individual request that contributes to that, right? And so okay, yeah, I see the issue.
Yeah, because it looks like we picked something. We picked an older transaction. Yeah.
Yep.
So here's the thing, and let me, Dave, while you're finding a more recent user session. So, folks, what happens is this data that we're capturing, the user session, the pure path information, we're going to store that for a period of time, right? And we capture as much of this data as we possibly can when we're monitoring an application. But what happens is over time, eventually, this information does get rolled out, right? So basically, if we're looking at information for a really old user session, sometimes we're just not going to have the details. But here, okay, and go ahead with this example here, Dave. Walk us through this session.
Yep. Okay. So here on this session, you can see the satisfaction of the user. Again, just high level overview of what that user is experiencing. And then here we can actually take a look at that user session from when they entered your site, and each action that they took here. And then again, as I was trying to show you here, we can go down here and we can drill into a waterfall analysis. And now that I actually chose one, so I have my demos bookmarked, which is the issue that I had there was an older one. So here we can actually see the view trace button. And from there, again, now we traveled from the back or the front end, that JavaScript monitoring that they had. And then we're moving into the back end, and we can see this is all of the backend services and API calls that we made that was related to that specific action that user took. And we can drill down into the code level analysis and see things like the actual code that's happening. If we have the logs correlated here, then you'd be able to see the actual log entries related to that. So, this is what allows you to actually determine exactly what's going on. If a user's having a problem, you can see, okay, maybe our calls to our database are taking too long, or maybe this piece of code that we pushed out was buggy, and you can actually drill down and see the exact line of code for each user session, right?
Hey, Dave. So I'm going to ask you a question. What do I have to do to get this level of detail with Dynatrace? Like, how do I actually? What do I have to configure to get that?
You install the OneAgent. Yeah, that's it. You install the OneAgent. You can, there are some additional details that you can pull from the front end if you use things like Angular or XJS. But I mean, out of the box, you get this, being able to travel from the user session into the back end, just installing the OneAgent onto your host.
You know what, Dave? I know. You worked out in the industry for quite some time, and I look at this. I'm still gobsmacked at how this works. Like, all I do is I run an installer, maybe bounce a process, and the next thing you know, I'm literally looking at, here's a user opening a page, and you just showed us how you could drill down from that page load into the backend request, and we're looking at SQL statements.
Exactly, right? I mean, again, you don't even have to do a hook into SQL to get these statements. It's looking at the actual processes that are running your applications that are making these SQL calls, and it's able to determine what statements are being made. I mean, that's magic, right? Like, I can't believe it still, right?
It really is. It really is wild. Really is wild. So what do you think, Dave? Is there, we got like 5 minutes. Do we have any more questions that are coming in here? Let's see. Looks like not only are questions coming in, but it looks like there's comments that are happening in the chat window. Again, why we love getting to know Dynatrace, because it's great for people who are new to Dynatrace. It's great for people who've used Dynatrace. Everyone gets an opportunity to ask questions and share their experiences. This is fabulous. So let's wrap up. What do you think, Dave? Let's wrap up. We talked about logs. We, talked about the AI and the automated problem detection, the user sessions. We walked through all of that. Maybe let's wrap up with just a little commentary on AppSec, right? What do you think about that? Why don't we
That
do
sounds like
that?
a plan. Okay. So this is one of the, again, we're always looking to deploy something, deploy new features, deploy new functionality. This is one of the things that I'm personally most excited about, is our application security. So again, I know we keep saying this, but I really want to drive it home. The OneAgent is what's looking at this. There's not a separate application security agent. And so what it's doing is it's not just looking at static, scans. It's not running every 5 minutes. This is real-time vulnerability visibility into your environment. And so I think one of the things that makes this really unique is that we have this integration with Sneak, right? So we're able to actually see, okay, which vulnerabilities are running in your environment, what are their scores. But then if we take a look at the actual information that we have here, we're also taking into account some various pieces of your environment to kind of determine whether or not it really is as much of a priority for you to take care of as maybe something else. So in this case here, right, we have a piece of infrastructure that is exposed to the public internet. It does have some severe data assets. So that means we really do think this is a 10, right? This is something that you should be focused on. You could take a look at which process groups are affected by this specific vulnerability. And you can even, again, drill down into it if you wish to. But what we can also do is we can take into account what's, let's say that you have a piece of infrastructure that's not exposed to the public internet. Well, we could go, okay, maybe they say this is a 7, right, as a score. But then we're going to downgrade that to a 6, right? It's still important, but it's not as important, maybe for you because it's a remote code execution, but you don't really have this exposed to the public internet. So, it's still something to take care of, but not something that's super important. And so I think this is something that, again, security is very important for a lot of businesses and industries, not just, sensitive ones. Having this real-time visibility into your vulnerabilities, in your environments is huge, right? You don't know what you don't know, and this allows you to know that.
So there's a couple of questions that just came up related to this. For the CVE feeds, how frequently is the fetch updates happening? So we're trying to do those as near real time as possible. So basically, when we're looking at Sneak or Snick, however you want to pronounce it, pretty much like once a minute, we're going out there and we're polling it to say, do you have anything new? Do you have anything new? Do you have anything new? Case in point, real world sort of practical example. When back in the holiday season, right as the Log4Shell, the Log4j issue was really starting to get known, within 15 minutes, we had customers that were already starting to see Dynatrace alert them to that Log4Shell vulnerability showing up in their systems. So it happens very, very quickly. This is not something that you're going to have to, do we do a fresh update like every week or something like that? No, it's not like that at all. Hey, folks, listen, we're at the top of the hour. There was one last question. Let's see if we can sneak in this last question. Dave, let's go to this. So let's go to the optimization in the left nav. So if you go to, folks, the question is, how do we do and see more around memory profiling? If you go to profiling and optimization from the left nav, right? And let's look out over the last 30 days, because I know we've got some memory dumps that happened like 30 days ago. Here, if you go grab that first one and just open it up over on the left-hand or right-hand side, and see right here where it says try out the continuous memory profiling, just go ahead and click on that. So this is a relatively new view, okay? So this just came out again recently. And what this is doing is this is actually generating effectively what they call a flame chart, which gives us an idea as to where the memory is in fact actually being consumed within this particular process. So if you scroll down here, you can actually see now, all these details as to how that memory is being consumed, by different methods and threads and that sort of thing within this application. So this, again, really new. Like, this has just been out for, I think, maybe a month or two. So it's a great question. Thanks for that question. And listen, folks, we're at the top of the hour now. So we're going to have to wrap it up. Hey, listen, Dave, thank you so much for doing this demonstration. I learned an awful lot with the way that you walk through it, and you come to this with fresh eyes, which is fabulous. I really appreciate it. You did a great job on the demo, answered the questions in a fabulous fashion. Thank you so much, Dave, for doing this. And folks, again, as always, thank you so much for your questions, because that's what really makes the Getting to Know Dynatrace sessions so interesting, is the questions that you bring to the table. So we're going to call it a wrap. If you're new to Dynatrace, you've never worked with Dynatrace before, please, by all means, go to dynatrace.com, go to the free trial, download, or not down. That's how old I am. I'm so old. Go to the free trial and sign up to get access to a fully functional Dynatrace instance. And give it a try. That's the one thing I would say. If you haven't tried it, give it a try. It's super simple, as Dave showed us today. So again, Dave, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
All right, folks. With that, so long, and we'll see you on another session of Getting to Know Dynatrace.